It's David Ducker coming back at you, and today we're going to be talking about death spirals. This is a rule which I've come across in several systems. I found tremendously fun, tremendously fast, and very descriptive. Sometimes called wound or injury systems. But basically, the way it works is if you are injured or damaged or wounded in any way, you get worse at doing pretty much everything until you are healed. So, the way I was introduced is a D6 system. So you have your stats. Each one is a number from 1 to 5, and whatever the number is, that's how many dice you roll. They're all 6-sided dice. So your strength is 3, then you roll 3 6-sided dice to test strength. If your strength is 5, you roll 5 6-sided dice to test strength. When you are injured or wounded, whatever you want to call it, you deduct 1 from all of your rolls. So if I have a strength of 4 and I take a wound, I only roll 3 dice because my strength is sapped by that wound. And I've seen this applied to all stats, so you take -1 from everything, or I've seen it applied specifically. If you only have 3 stats, your strength, dexterity, and intelligence, that's it, then maybe to stretch it out, every wound goes to one of the 3. It slows you down, it hurts you, or it staggers you, a blow to the head. You're not going to be doing mathematics at a high level. You take a mace to your face. So this has been very descriptive. Usually it's very specific. You get hit in the knee, in the arm, in the gut, in the head. Wherever you get hit, that's where the wound goes to. And you just role play through that. And I mean, you can role play where you get hit, depending on your GM and the rule set. For me, I'll be like, okay, this orc wounds you, describe how. And the player might say, oh, well, my character is bad at protecting his damn head. He keeps his shield too low. So the orc gets him with a lucky cut across his head. The blood's pouring into his face. He can't see. He's panicking. So that's why he's getting -1 to everything. Can't see and he's panicking. -1. And once the combat is over, the wound may or may not go away quickly. With that head wound, it might need some stitches. It might need a poultice, just a bandage. It might be really easy to clean up. Or it might be more severe. I'm speaking generally and broadly. I'm not picking any one really specific rule set. So in this way, you can be really specific, which I like, because that way it builds your descriptions up, right? It's more cinematic. It's not nebulous. So that's one thing I like. The other thing I like is it is simplistic. It's -1 to everything. You're easier to hit. It's harder for you to hit anybody. You run slower. You're not thinking clearly. Very, very easy. It's -1. Then it's -2. Then it's -3. At some point, you're just dead or unconscious. Very, very easy to keep track of. So I love death spirals, wounds, injuries, because they are specific, they're descriptive, they're cinematic, and they're simple, which means they're fast to resolve. So let's contrast against probably the other most popular system for damage as hit points. Hit points are often complicated to track. Usually your pool is enormous, and keeping track of your current hit points at any one time, they go up, they go down by a much larger margin than wounds. Typically wounds, if you take a lot of systems, it's 1, 2, 3, you're out. It's almost like having only 3 hit points for everyone. And there are a lot of exceptions to that. Some go up to 5, 7. Some depend on your character. If you're 7 feet tall, you might have 7. But with hit points, it can be up in the hundreds, so you have to keep track of. So it's constant adjusting on your sheet, on your app, on your notepad, whatever it is. It's just mechanics and mechanics and mechanics. And every time you look at the mechanics, it breaks your immersion just a little tiny bit. The other thing I don't like about hit points is they're usually vague and nebulous. Where are you hit? How bad is your hit? Is a 5 hit point wound the same for a big guy versus a little guy? It makes it harder to describe, so it's harder to visualize, so it's less cinematic. So I don't like it because I like knowing what my character sees, what he feels, what he experiences. So it needs to be simple. I like to be able to look at somebody and say, oh, he's got a cut on his arm. So, I know he's probably going to be in pain. He's moving slow. That arm is going to be really slow, probably. And his hand might be slick with blood. He's impaired. Whereas in hit points, that may or may not actually affect his performance. I'm not saying every hit point system is bad, but the vast majority of ones I've seen are bad because they're too vague. I don't know what 5 hit points looks like. I've had people say, oh, hit points don't reflect damage at all. It's a near miss. I'm like, okay, well, how do you describe a near miss versus a miss? And they're like, oh, the same. I'm like, well, then why is a hit point even a thing? Shouldn't it just be a miss? Like, oh no, because they get closer to hitting you. I'm like, well, that seems unduly complicated to me. And then what does cure do? And they're like, oh, don't worry about that. And I'm sure there are good hit point systems, but usually they're vague. And that's going to hurt your description. It's going to hurt your immersion, your cinematic style. And they're usually complicated, cumbersome, slow. There's a lot of accounting involved. So I hadn't done a video, I don't think, about wounds, injuries. So I just wanted to share that with everyone. For those who've only played hit point games, try the other. Try incorporating it. Seek out those systems like the D6 system that have wound damage rather than hit point damage, or the Warhammer Fantasy system. There are any number of them out there. I believe Savage Worlds has a similar system. World of Darkness may. So I just want to kind of share that concept. Of course, it can be very specific as well. It could be, Warhammer has a table. You roll on the table. It's like, oh, you were hit in the arm. And as a result, and you roll again on the table, your finger is broken and you can't grip anything in that hand. So there are levels of complexity you can take it to, but and having different armor on different body parts as well, which is a little too complex for me personally, but at least it's specific, whereas hit points are vague. So if you're gonna be complex, at least be specific, and if you're gonna be simple, at least be specific. Specificity is really the big daddy of cinematic style. Explaining exactly what's going on, so no one's confused, and they can work off of that knowledge instead of being vague, so nobody can work off of any knowledge because they have no knowledge, because the GM doesn't know, because the system doesn't know, because it's usually poorly written. So that's my rant, my ramble. Let me know what you think about wound systems, why you like them, why you don't like them, about hit points, why you like that or don't, and leave that in the comments below. And until I see you again, good day and good gaming.